Good morning and a warm welcome to everybody again. And it's my privilege to introduce you to the country director of Friedrich Ebert Stiftung, Mr. Ulrich Storck. Ulrich has previously worked for FES in United Kingdom, Greece, Guinea, the West Balkans, Central America, and Morocco. He has studied economics and philosophy and development policy in Frankfurt, Montpellier, Hamburg, and Germany. It's my privilege to welcome you, Ulrich, and thank you for hosting this conference with us. It's a pleasure to have you with us. So over to you, Ulrich.
Thank you very much. Good morning to all of you. I hope I'm audible, and if not, someone would notify me. I hope the technicals are working in this session. What is somehow the official opening, if I understood that correctly, and I want to say some words before you can go into the workshop session, and the real mutual learning, what you're all looking for, is then starting. So I'm Ulrich Storck. I'm the new director of FES India. I've just arrived and everything is new for me. I'm sure you are hearing me for the first time, but hopefully not for the last time. I'm with the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung already since 25 years, and I've been working mostly in the global south, in Africa, Latin America, but as well in Europe, in the UK, as it was already said, and other European countries. And now I'm arriving in India, and I'm very curious and looking forward to the work for the next years here. Because of my background, I'm also thinking that problems and challenges are globally, internationally connected, particularly when we talk about climate issues, and that problems and solutions can only be achieved through international cooperation. So this is why we are here, and my colleague Manvi already introduced in some words the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung, so I won't repeat that anymore. We are an international foundation. There are several, we are already existing since 1925, a very traditional organization, and we have offices in 120 countries all over the world, working together with our partners. And I think the climate and ecological questions are part of our programs all over the world. So it is as well in the region of South Asia. Some words to say that our current development model, whether the developed world or the developing, still lacks in addressing the interlinkages between ecological and social problems with economic progress. Silo working culture has led to disjoint efforts with respect to urbanization, climate action plans, and energy transition. And over the years, this has resulted in a widening of the social and economic disparities. As most policies designed for this are linear in nature, they do not recognize the necessary interdependence of these problems, which result in a weak adoption of policies and efforts in this field. The vision of our social ecological transformation work in Asia, as well as in India, what is a part of this program, is to foster social progress, keeping in mind the limitations and capacities of the planet's resources. And for this, we strongly believe that a progressive and bold paradigm needs to be established. A paradigm what consists in a combination of the 3 E's: ecological sustainability, economic progress, and equity. For us at FES, climate justice is an important component of social justice, and we strive to work on the same through our intersectional work on national, regional, and the global level. FES and its partner employ multi-branched approaches to shape this transformation: climate justice, gender justice, phasing out of fossil fuels, ecological, just transition, participatory policies and action, and international law. Moreover, international commitments such as SDGs, the currently debated Paris Agreement, and climate commitments provide the framework and the much needed opportunity. These instruments can be creatively used to bring environmental sustainability, urban stability, and equity back into the economic growth story. For this, we need to establish evidence-based interlinkages between issues such as air pollution, solid waste management, construction and urban water management, noise pollution, depleting biodiversity, livelihoods with climate change. A very crucial aspect of this is inclusion of actors who have economic and political capital, such as the industry, small businesses, entrepreneurs, municipal representatives, and urban middle-class consumers, along with local and subnational actors who can increase the uptake for an integrated social ecological transformation. Alongside efforts need to be made to increase the visibility of marginalized groups as informal sector workers, indigenous communities, women and other gender, as they are particularly and differentially impacted by ill-planned urbanization, non-participatory climate action plans, and market-driven energy transition policies. We hope that this 3-day International Sustainability Conference is a step into this direction. FES, our partner Sprouts, and all the experts, resource persons, eminent personalities, thought leaders, influencers, and young citizens from around the world have joined hands to realize this commitment. This conference provides a wide platform for deep and long-term engagement, multi-stakeholder dialogues, and exchange of synergies, what can be leveraged to creating mindset shifts, policy changes, address stakeholder-specific challenges, and present solutions for the same. The deliberations and discussions from this conference will add to the new paradigm, what was mentioned: low energy, climate friendly, resilient, and inclusive society for the future, and should bring India closer to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. So this is what I had to say as a quick introduction, and I would like to now to introduce our keynote speaker for today. And I excuse myself already for my definitely wrong pronunciation of Indian names. This is something what I have to learn in the next weeks and months. So Shri Jaivardhan Singh, I hope that's more or less correct, is a politician from the state of Madhya Pradesh, and he's currently a member of the Legislative Assembly in this state parliament from Raghogarh constituency. He's a member of the Indian National Congress Party and is currently the youngest member in the parliament of his state. He graduated from Columbia University School of International Public Affairs, where he did a master in public administration, in development practice, learning courses focused on sustainable development through an integrated model, what covers areas such as food systems and agriculture, health and sanitation, infrastructure development, climate change, and energy issues that affect countries in the developing world. So just our subject of this conference. In the future, Shri Jaivardhan plans to work full-time in his home of Raghogarh, and he plans to use his experience to bring in research scholars and development practitioners from Columbia University and other world-renowned institutes to use global best practices in development back home. His plan to work primarily in education, health, women and children welfare, and the agriculture. Italy farmers can benefit from moving up the value chain to get profit margins. He told that the future lies in grooming the youth by giving them access to better quality education, technology, and skill development programs. Dear Shri Jaivardhan, I'm very happy that you are here, and welcome to this very important conference, and hand over the floor to you for your introductory speech. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you so much, sir. It's an honor to meet you all virtually, Mr. Ulrich Storck. Thank you for inviting me for the conference. And this is the first time I'm actually getting a chance to interact with, the FES, with Sprouts. And it's an honor that even Mr. Bunkar Roy Saab,
Sorry, sir, you are on mute.
Sorry, now am I audible? So yes, thank you, Mr. Ulrich Storck, for the introduction, and you've done a very good job at the pronunciation. I see you probably have a lot of experience already with Indian names, and also I'm honored to speak in front of Mr. Bunkar Roy Saab. I'm a big fan, sir, and thank you to FES and to Sprouts for giving me the opportunity to speak in front of distinguished podcasts and panels. Just to give you a background, I'm an MLA for the second time from Madhya Pradesh, and I was a minister for 15 months when Kaji was in his government. Before becoming an MLA for the first time in 2013, I did my master's from Columbia, from SIPA, between 2011 and 13. And at that point of time, I got the privilege of working with professors such as Jeffrey Sachs, who at that time was special advisor to the UN Secretary General. Also, I got to work with Professor Joseph Stiglitz, who's the Nobel laureate. I got to work with Professor Jagdish Bhagwati, Arvind Panagaria-ji, who were also at Columbia at that time. And, personally speaking, for me, if you look at Madhya Pradesh, the state from where I belong, which I represent, we, by area, have the largest forest cover in India today, if you look at any state in the country. And we also have the highest population of tribals. But in the last, I would say, 20, 30 years, we have seen this complex scenario where there has been this major conflict between, I would say, population growth and the growth of forests and the protection of forests within our entire state. You look at it from the point of view of even urban areas like Bhopal, Indore, Jabalpur, Gwalior, or you look at it from the point of view of small villages and hamlets which are surrounded by forests. And because, Madhya Pradesh is for some of the national park, which is in Bundelkhand. We have Bandhavgarh National Park, which is next to Riva. Satpura, the entire range, is one of the largest forest covers anywhere in the country, which is a beautiful habitat, which converges into the Pachmari Hills. And all these areas are well protected, but at the same time, I think for any MLA, policymakers policies and to frame policies in such a way where we are able to provide a sustained development for the population, for the tribals, as well as for the environment and for the forest. What we have seen in most areas of Madhya Pradesh in the last 20, 30 years, there has been heavy deforestation. And I feel the major reason for that is that we have not been able to educate the population, especially in the forests and the villages, as to how they can in forest areas as wood, as the only form of revenue generation for them. So in turn, what happens is there's heavy deforestation, there's illegal wood cutting and wood selling, because we've always viewed that in forest areas, people who live in the forest dwellers, they depend largely on forest wood for their livelihood. But at the same time, what is also important to understand, and this I understood even better when I was at Columbia, I did an internship with Embrapa, which is the government, agriculture government, the Brazilian government's agriculture department. And what they do there is they work in the Amazon with the people living in the forest. And there they educate the people living in the Amazon as to how the forest is very essential for their livelihood. And what they focused out there in the Amazon region was how not the wood of the tree, but the fruits were more valuable to the tribes out there. And they used to have education programs where they would inculcate a behavior where the forest dwellers would be able to understand the value of the fruit of other parts of the tree and not the wood, therefore leading to less deforestation and more value for the tree. And I feel today in Madhya Pradesh, in India, and in our forest areas, there are many trees which have medicinal value, which have other forms of, can be forms of acid other than for their wood. And what's important today is to encourage people living in the forest, people from the tribal areas, to understand the value of this. And for that, we have to work at a much lower level, which includes at the panchayat level, at the block level, and to have people, NGOs, organizations such as FES, such as Sprouts, where we can have your volunteers, your team coming, spending time in these areas and providing that information, as well as examples where people can actually understand the value of preserving their forests and the preserving of trees. So when I went to Brazil in 2012, we lived in the Amazon for 3 months. And there was this one species called the anaeroba tree, which was there in the Amazon. And the people there were encouraged, and the anaeroba tree had a lot of value in, the wood had value in making furniture and exporting across the entire world. But also the anaeroba fruit had a very high medicinal value in a number of cosmetics and as well as in other products. So we were there with the team of Embrapa, which is the government's agriculture arm. And we spent 3 months there researching on how the anaeroba fruit could be sourced locally, could be harvested by the people living in the Amazon, and then how they could get a proper market to actually get a sustainable livelihood for themselves. Therefore, reducing the cutting of the anaeroba tree and using the fruit more. Therefore, what would happen was they would preserve the trees at one end, and also at the other end, be able to market the fruit, the produce, therefore gaining economically, and also at the same time preserving the environment. So that is something which I don't feel we are doing in India yet. And I feel the government, whether it's at the central level or at the state level, must enact such policies, because you cannot ignore the needs of the people living in the forests, whether they are tribal, whether they are other castes. You must be able to explain to the people living in the forest as to how afforestation and the importance of planting trees, the importance of not cutting trees, and what other forms of value addition can they get For example, in Madhya Pradesh, you have the Tendupatta Sangrahaks, people in the forest who collect Tendupatta. Then you have the commercial players in each division who buy the Tendupatta from the tribals. But that is only one step. If you are able to, go forward in the value chain, give them a better economic opportunity. Just collecting Tendupatta and selling it to a businessman is not enough value for a tribal economically. What we must look at is, okay, you're collecting Tendupatta, but how can the tribals gain from a forward linkage in the value chain? That is something which we must look at, as people who may be an MLA, maybe someone who's a volunteer, an organization, people who are working in civil society, people who are interested in preserving the forests in our region. Because, Madhya Pradesh has a lot of diversity. On one end, you have tribals towards Jhabua, Alirajpur side, who are the Bhils and Bilalas. Then you have the tribals in Mahakaushal, next to Jabalpur, in the entire area, which are the Gond Adivasis. Then you have, other towards my area of Guna, Rajgarh, and also of Gwalior, Shivpuri. We have the Sehri Adivasis, who are even the more primitive tribes. So today, it's very important for all of us to find ways in which we can educate them about the importance of preserving the environment. Now, as a minister, when I was the minister for 15 months, I got the opportunity to work in the urban administration department. And I was hearing Mr. Ulrich Storck's, comments, where, so you spoke about, even in the urban areas, about how we must, preserve our environment. Because, in cities in India, there's not really much interest in making sure that we have sustainable development. And because the UN is focusing, it had the MDGs earlier, where we had the Millennium Development Goals, but now it's the SDGs. It's all about sustainability. And what I learned when I was the minister for 15 months in the urban department is that in Madhya Pradesh, for example, except for maybe Indore, Bhopal, which have 80% sewage coverage, the remaining 350 towns had 0% sewage coverage. So it's shocking to actually realize that not only in MP, but the entire country, except for barring maybe a Delhi, Bombay, Bangalore, Chennai, the tier 2, tier 3 towns literally have 0% sewage coverage. And when I was the minister for urban, I realized that we had no sort of scheme or sort of plan to be able to invest that much of money for the infrastructure to have a proper sewage system across all our towns. To give an example, even if you are to have a sewage system in a town of 50,000 people, really around, and there's no such policy at the moment from the government which is focusing on this. So what I had done that time was I had invited the World Bank and the ADB, because these organizations are involved currently with states, with the center, in providing water supply schemes to certain cities, to certain urban areas, to certain villages. What I asked them to do was to bring the global best practices that are happening right now in the Western countries, where there's 100% sewage coverage, and to bring that model to India. Because what I saw in MP when I was the minister was that there was no such policy and no such best practice for implementing sewage coverage for the entire town. And when we talk about environment preservation, we talk about global health. If today we are not being able to provide any town in India with adequate sewage coverage, that is a major failure and one of the biggest challenges which we face today, because those are the basic health necessities which every urban area must have. Maybe in a small village, you can do it in a more decentralized model where you have a fecal sludge policy. But in the bigger cities or bigger towns where, normally the town is very congested, you have a population of 30,000, 40,000 people live in a very small area, that's very important to have systems in place so that there's no human waste lying in the open alleys, which is kind of what happens in India. So I feel at the moment, no thrust from the government at the national level, which is focusing on this. And this is where I feel we must think about looking. There's of course a lot of talk these days about green hydrogen, about increasing usage of energy from solar panels, from wind energy, and reducing our thermal usage. But at the same time, these small other issues which I spoke about, whether it's to do with the forest and preserving our environment, and also to do with the sewage coverage in urban areas. I think those are some places which we must look at from now and plan for the next 25, 30 years for the country, especially in urban areas. Also, I feel that if Sprouts and Mr. Ulrich Storck and his team of FES are willing to come down to Madhya Pradesh to work with us, I'll be more than happy to show your volunteers around, because most people I assume who are listening in to this conversation, to this dialogue, are living in urban areas. And today, what we need is for people who are interested in policy, who are interested in subjects like environment preservation, sustainability. You all must come down to the ground and to the rural areas of India, of Madhya Pradesh, to the smaller towns, not the big towns like Bhopal or Indore, but to the smaller towns where you never heard about, where there's no airport, and to actually spend time there to understand the way people are thinking. Because today, in the small towns, there's not so much awareness about the importance of climate change, about the importance of sustainability, about the importance of making sure that there's not a very high amount of plastic use. So you have to be able to bring the best practices to the ground. Yes, as an MLA, I try and do my bit. But if we have thinkers like yourselves, people who have the experience at international level or national level, who have an education background where you have learned the best practices which could be implemented in our country, we must have people who are listening in today to this conference who are willing to come to smaller towns and work here, work with the people. When I was at Columbia, one of the biggest topics which we used to speak about was behavioral change, about being able to work with people in the small towns, in villages, and making them understand the value of sustainability, and to educate them, whether it's at the school level, at the college level, or even at the postgraduate level. Maybe they've done education. But even with adults, if you spend time with them, if you show them a viable economic alternative, if you show them how sustainability of the forest, of the environment, can bring a positive impact on their lives, things can change. So I feel this is some areas which must be discussed and must be planned. And of course, these were some of the thoughts which I had in my mind. So Anandji, I hope I was able to provide some value to this conference. I'm very encouraged to see the participation, especially amongst, I can see a lot of young people here involved in this conference. And I'd be more than happy to answer any questions if there are. But once again, a pleasure to speak to the entire, to all the distinguished guests who are listening in, and really, it's an honor to speak to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Jaivardhan ji. Mr. Kedarnath Rao Ghorpade has a question. Mr. Ghorpade has been a former Deputy Planning Commissioner of MMRDA Mumbai. Mr. Ghorpade.
Good morning. Nice being invited to share my views, and thanks to the FES person and as well as the Honorable Minister, sir. It's been great, and in 40 years, what I learned being in urban planning and in the Mumbai metropolitan region, and being as part of the smart cities in MP, since the question was specific to MP, I did Jabalpur and Indore. So I have moved around MP quite a bit to understand the smaller towns also. Since you asked and you posed this way, I would put it that one of the biggest things when we did for a project in Amravati capital city was, are our cities water sensitive? The answer is a big no. The piped systems across, even in the smart cities, what we have been looking at, we don't have a straight solution. We don't know from where the water is coming, and we do not know where the water is being disposed. That is the first part of the story. The second part of the story comes is, if diamond cuts diamond, nature will give solutions through nature only, not technology. So we need to look at this part of the story. The third is we have in India a Center for Science and Environment in Delhi, and they have been doing a lot of work on water sensitive cities, FECL, and also looking at different concepts. Recently, I attended one of these sessions and also participated actively in it. Are we water sensitive? The answer again is no. The fourth question comes as the development plan, which we all planners make for the cities as per the local Regional Town Planning Acts. We need to understand our entire focus is on creating the land into an asset and real estate. Can we leave or can we create a relationship between the land and the sustainability part of it based on water? But that's what the traditional towns have taught us. And you will find there are ponds, there are kund, and there are water bodies which is floating around in every city. We have filled them all. Chennai is a classic case. Karnataka and Bangalore is another classic case. Jabalpur, which had 53 lakes, I think is left with 38. It's another classic case. So if you look at all these things, let us take it forward. And I am willing to associate, I'm part of, been associated with Anand and also FES. I'm always willing to share whatever little gyan I have to share with you. Thank you, sir. Good listening to you, both of you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Jaivardhan, would you like to respond to some of the points he's raised?
No, actually, I totally agree with Kedarnath ji. I think what he has said is very important. And this was the point which I earlier mentioned, that what's happened is because we built our cities without really looking at anything to do with sewage or where the water in the city was going. So even though now we're working to every household, and you know, it was done through earlier governments as well, through JNNURM, UID, SSMT, and other schemes, and Amrit now. But like what Mr. Kedarnath said, the issue is that we really don't know where the water is going after the usage. So what you have today in the country, in probably 95% of the cities and towns, is that you have the water going into open nalas, and there's no sort of, okay, now we've started talking about STPs and WTPs for the treatment of wastewater. But at the same time, this is only there in, you know, now in every state, you'll probably have it in 10, 15 cities, not the remaining 90% of the population. So I think it's a very good point which Sir has added. And, you know, if we ever get a chance to work in the government soon, I'll take up Sir's, advice. And definitely, there could be something which we could do where we have a comprehensive plan for every urban town, where the study is done across the entire, to all the cities, to assess what through GIS and through mapping of where the current water is going, and then to understand how that can be treated, so that we can avoid the water pollution which exists today. I think that could be something which could be done definitely in the future. And whenever I do get a chance to work in the government, I'll look up sir for sure. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Jaivardhan, with your permission, I'd like to request Bankar Roy ji, since he's with us, if he can, respond and give a few comments from his side as well. Is that okay? Mr. Yeah. Mr. Bankar Roy. Sir, Mr. Bankar Roy. I think he's on. Bankar Roy ji, if I can request you. So I had a question for you, Mr. Jaivardhan ji. We'll come to Mr. Bankar Roy in a moment. We worked extensively in Madhya Pradesh, Satpura, and fantastic forests that are there, contiguous to Kanha and many of these other areas. So my question is that besides tourism, because tourism seems to be one of the very prime ways that one economizes, or rather monetizes on the resources without causing much damage to system. So according to you, what other ways can a green economy can be related with forest? You mentioned about Tendupata extraction and other things, but what are the other possibilities that can bring in a good synergy between the forest conservation and the ecological services, as we say, for communities and smaller industries, especially to connect with the forest ecology?
I think that's a very good question, and I would go again back to the example of Brazil, where I saw that they had done extensive research on the medicinal value of certain trees, certain plants which existed. And today, our flora and fauna is so rich, and there's so much of potential there in our forest, but it's not been looked at commercially. To highlight one point which I noticed myself was when COVID was creating havoc across our entire urban areas. In my own constituency, I have around, I would say, a population of 15,000 tribals, the Bhilalas, and not one got COVID. And there was not one person living in the forest who even had fever. And they were, and although in next to them, like you could say, 5 kilometers next to them was another bigger village. There we had nearly 30 deaths of COVID. But as you left the village, you came 2 kilometers, you walked, into the forest. There was not a single case of COVID. They were all healthy. They had no issues. There was not one case of that. And it could have been because of the lifestyle where people live in the forest who work continuously and who normally don't use that much of maybe cars and bikes. Could have just been the environment around them, could have just been luck. But there are certain and lots of these examples of where there's so many different plants and trees in our forest today, which have a very high, usage in medicines and in other products. And I feel, like you said, it's a very good question, because today we don't look at Kana, Satpura, Bandhavgarh, Panna, Pech beyond tourism. But I feel if we now, have some proper research done on the trees, on the flora and fauna, and to actually assess the different diverse species of trees and plants that we have, and what use can that be to the bigger cosmetic or to the bigger medicinal industry. There, I think, is one, area which has not been tapped yet, and where we could see a lot of potential in the future.
There's one question by very interesting question by Neha Yadav. Yeah, she says it's interesting. It's nice to hear from a political leader's inspiring speech. I wanted to know what sustainability means to you, and what are the things that you do from your side in your lifestyle to make a difference. Also, what are your views on COP26, India's new target of 2027?
I feel that as an MLA who's representing the people who I represent from Raghogarh, for me the biggest challenge today is that we have a very high population, but we have to make sure that high population is an asset and not a liability. And the biggest way to create, to make sure that the population is an asset is through skilling, through education, through awareness. And what we are doing in my constituency right now is we are providing children from the age of 5 till the age of 17, till the age of 20, 25, different opportunities, through the quality of schooling, through skilling, whether in electrician, whether in in different in welding, in firefighting, in training of other jobs, training women in, for example, in sewing and stitching clothes, and giving them a market in the bigger towns, say in Bhopal or Indore, creating women's self-help groups. So we are focusing on ways in which there's a comprehensive way of looking at human resource training and human resource skilling, because today we have to look at our high population as an asset, and the way it can be an asset is if it is skilled and the skills honed properly, and that can only be done through opportunities, through providing centers of excellence where they get the best possible opportunities. I'll give you an example. We have a school which we started around say 11 years back. The third batch has graduated from their 12th this year, and it was a batch of 30 students, and 4 people have cleared NEET, have got a score of over 500, and will probably become doctors from a small town like from Raghogarh. So for me, that was one of the biggest achievements that I have done till now, because it's a NGO which runs the school, and we tied up with this NGO called Avanti, which was started by a person from IIT Bombay and a Harvard Business School graduate, where they had IIT and NIT graduates who were teaching children from the class 8 onwards and giving them training in IIT JEE. So we had this Avanti Education who tied up with us in Madhya Pradesh, and to see people from small towns and from a village to be able to clear the NEET exam and then become and get a degree in 4 years for MBBS and maybe an MD, that is what I feel is an achievement or positivity. And that's why I feel that today, if we are to look at the environment and to look at being able to tackle climate change, 2075 is, there's an old saying that in the long run we're all dead. So 2075 is too, I think, far a date. It should be looking at 2030, 2035, the next 10, 20 years, where we are able to provide a faster change. Today, because of climate change, the kind of changes you are seeing, you have a winter which lasts for 2 months in Delhi or in Madhya Pradesh. Starts in November now, it ends in first, second week of Feb. This wasn't the case when 30 years back. In every way, it's becoming a bigger challenge. So we must have far more comprehensive and far more bullish policies which look at preserving the environment than what we have today.
There is a very poignant question asked by Sumaira Abdulji, and I can corroborate that myself. I've been traveling in National Chapter as well as in Jamba Ramgarh and part of Sarista. Her question is that in Madhya Pradesh, there is rampant sand mining that is happening, and the sand is a very important, ecosystem for biodiversity, whether it is the gharial, whether it is turtles, etc. So, how can one control illegal sand mining?
So that's again a very valid point, because in the last 10-15 years, we have seen this case of heavy illegal mining. And I don't want to sound political, but when we were then governed 15 years, for 15 months, till last year, March 2020, in our 15 months, we came up with a sand mining policy where, because see what happens if you don't have a policy, then it's all illegal, right? At the same time, people who live next to the river banks, people who live, in every town, in every village, for construction, for other purposes, you need sand. And what was happening until then was it was just rampant illegal mining because there was no policy. So we came up with a policy where the tenders were done across the entire state in every district, which aimed at certain areas, which gave certain dedicated mines or areas which where there would be they would take out the sand. But at the same time, we also looked at the environment, the riverbed, extra layers of it come, and sometimes you need to do the dredging or to take some of it out to make sure that doesn't interrupt the river flow. So that was looked at during our time. But again, we didn't get the full 5 years to actually go through it. But what we need to arrest the illegal sand mining today is giving a lot more power to the people who are in the mining department, who can make sure that illegal mining is stopped, is that there's a higher punishment for people who are doing illegal mining. Because you'll see today, one of the biggest assets of Madhya Pradesh is the Narmada River. But the way illegal mining has happened in the Narmada, there are certain areas which I have seen myself where there's barely any river left. So this is something which needs to be looked at in a much more serious manner. So I have to just got a prior appointment. So
one last quick question from my side is that I know it's a political question, but if you come back in power, and we wish you do, what are your quick 2 or 3 vision points that you feel that this will be like the actions in terms of the climate change policy that one can bring about, or what you will bring about?
I think one, of course, will be a much more bullish, policy to reduce dependence on thermal power, and to look at. We already have some projects in hydro, but look at bigger projects in solar, wind. There is one big project coming up of green hydrogen in my own constituency, because we have the GAIL plant here. So it's probably going to start next year, is what we are looking at. I think one aspect is, of course, to look at green energy in a much more optimistic and a much larger scale than what we're looking at it today. The second would be to identify in each division, Madhya Pradesh, what are the trees and plants in the forests which have a value, maybe other than through their wood, whether it's through some medicinal aspect, whether it's through some cosmetic aspect, whether it's through some other aspect, and to promote that in these areas. Because today you can't just say that, no, you live in the forest, but you can't touch the product, you can't touch the tree. Because at the end of the day, people living in the forest even today, they depend on the forest for their livelihood. And to be able to provide them with a better opportunity than just collecting tindu patta should be one of our biggest objectives and our priorities. And this will require a comprehensive framework where you are able to identify such plants or such trees. You have to decide how that can be scaled up, because you need to have scale for any business venture, for any economic activity. And then how will you link that with the commercial aspect? One is the collection, one is the distribution, and the commercial aspect of it, the packaging and the collection, everything. So how can the stakeholders at the forest village level be linked to that is something which we will look at in the future, definitely. And the third, I think, which, because I myself was urban minister for 15 months, will be at looking at more sustainable townships. What Mr. Kiranaji had also mentioned is to be able to provide a framework and to provide an overall, policy where the current, pressure on townships, the pressure on cities that is happening has become too much and it's unsustainable. Is to be able to work on dispersal of towns, is to be able to have, you do have master plans, you do have town planning, but to be able to link that with the environment, to be able to link that with, where is the water going, where is the waste going at the moment? Because today, in today's India, in today's, urban Madhya Pradesh, we still have 90% or 95% of human waste which is flowing into open nalis across the entire town. So that, how that can be changed in the next 20, 30 years. How can we have the financing? Because talking about it is one thing, but to be able to actually implement that, you need a large number of funds. I mean, it's if I say even 10,000 crores, it may sound still maybe a little bit less if you want to cover every town in India. Or in Madhya Pradesh, forget India. India, you need much more. But only for MP, you'll need much more money to have a proper sewage system in all the towns. So, these things can't be done immediately. You need to have a comprehensive framework for it. But we have to act now. We have to look at ways in which this can be done in an implementable manner, and to be able to bring in best practices. Because today I feel in some of the work that we need to get done in our urban areas, we don't yet know the best systems that are in place. Or if there are some examples in other states, in the country, where people have done a better job of looking at how to control sewage, how to negotiate, and how to get a good infrastructure in place, that could be taken in board. For example, Indore is famous for our work in keeping the city clean. Indore is the cleanest city in Madhya Pradesh. And when I became minister, we made a framework where we got the Indore model to be implemented in all the urban towns, where we had the NGO that had worked in Indore, where we had door-to-door collection of waste, which is now being done in other towns, and segregation of waste at the household. So these things we had started, and we have started in Madhya Pradesh, but we will hope that once we get a chance, that we will scale it up to every town in the state. Okay, thank you, sir. And thank you, everyone. I'll try and listen in even now, but I will have to, just excuse me if you can, so I can get back to my appointment. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for giving us time. And I mean, you also stayed for longer than you had committed. So we are very thankful. I think we speak language.
It's an honor for me.
Yeah.
And I'll try and get some time with taking an appointment with Mr. Bunker Roy sometime. I really admire him, and I hope I can.
We do too. Yes.
Too. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. It was a pleasure to listen to it.
I just wanted to say one last thing before you leave Jaivardhan, that today is Dr. Salim Ali's birthday, 12th of November, and it was a fantastic ode to Dr. Salim Ali to be talking about forests and in Madhya Pradesh in this sustainability conference today. So thank you for that.
Congratulations, sir. Very happy birthday to you, sir.
Dr. Salim Ali.